Hello everyone, the introduction of the TIGERMEN recently, the brand new DLC for Total War Warhammer 3 is quite exciting for a number of reasons. Beshiva is really cool, but the most important thing that stuck out to me was the fact that the TIGERMEN are in fact Indish and not Cathayan. This means that we're starting to get units from different cultures not yet fully represented in the Warhammer fantasy world, and it could lead to something quite good in the future. And today we need to speak about the Kingdoms of Ind, not just because it's something topical, but it should be kept in conversation as much as possible to remind Creative Assembly that yes, we do want that. Don't think it needs reminding through Games Workshop, but there's a few reasons why. So let's talk about the Kingdoms of Ind. But before anything, a big thank you to our video sponsor, Instant Gaming. Instant Gaming is a platform where you could buy video games at a discounted rate. There are loads of games coming out now, like seriously, it's been just so much faster already than it has been in 2025. And yeah, a lot of games means a lot of money spent, so why not get yourself a discount through Instant Gaming when they've got deals on titles that have released and those that are soon to be released, like Resident Evil Requiem, one that I'm looking forward to myself because I love the Resident Evil franchise. 20% off, it's sweet. But not only that, but we do have our monthly giveaway going on. Win the game of your choice. All you gotta do is click on the link in the description below, sign up, and you don't even have to make a purchase. Making a purchase with my special link also in the description below supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. I've had a working relationship with this company since 2024 and it's always worked out quite well. I use their services myself, so I'm always happy to promote a company that I myself use because, I mean, it's just a bit more honest that way. Once again, thank you to Instant Gaming for the sponsor. Let's return to our regularly scheduled programming. The subcontinent for Ind has always existed in the Immortal Empires map. The problem is that, like Athaloran back in Warhammer 1, it's been closed off. Now, Athaloran eventually opened up, but it doesn't really mean that Ind, or even Koresh right next to it, is eventually going to open up, whether it be for its own DLC or just for the sake of opening up the regions of the map to allow for a release of congestion within the game, which is very needed, by the way. Now, like the rest of the Warhammer fantasy world, Ind also is based on something from our real world, that being India, being a massive subcontinent with its own peoples, cultures, religions, and the rest. We've never really had a lot of lore around that location, barring some brief mentions through a lot of Warhammer Fantasy roleplay books, and little brief mentions throughout, say, for example, the Dark Elves and other races. Ind has always been a really curious point because we have known it as the land of 1,000 gods. I know many people do want Ind not only in-game but also Warhammer the Old World because, I mean, new models and new monsters, what's not to love? This isn't a call for the sake of diversity, but rather the fact that there's a giant blank spot on the map and it is absolutely jarring. Now, the introduction of the TIGERMEN DLC, which we'll be releasing at some point this year, we hope, means that we're getting our first look at denizens of Ind, because it is confirmed that the TIGERMEN are considered mercenaries, meaning that they're not native to Grand Cathay, but rather from Ind. This is very obvious considering how the Indish creatures here do have some styling in terms of like weapons and also just the jewelry. It's linked up to kind of medieval, kind of fantastical India, which is great. I think they look fantastic too. We even get lore tidbits saying that yes, this is one of the tribes essentially from the highlands of Ind that moved up to Grand Cathay after what can be assumed as a chaos invasion or just in general corruption attempt by Tzeentch. Which we know that Tzeentch is very active in the east. It's not just Ind, we know that he's got quite a lot of prevalence in Grand Cathay, and also we know that he's active within the lands of Nippon. I think an important note to put from the lore blurbs is that yes, they still worship their Indish god Kamau, which is the chief deity for the TIGERMEN, which is curious because most religion has been outlawed in Grand Cathay in a respect of not allowing for corruption, I assume, or to try and limit it as much as possible, but the TIGERMEN, seeing as they're not Cathayan and still don't identify as Cathayan, they do still worship their deities. The important part here is because that means that the Indish pantheon is still very much active, and yep, that's great. Now we can maybe get a little bit more information as time progresses. We do have to talk about the fact that the artwork posted by Games Workshop shows them having more Cathayan style gear, barring the shield, I believe. But I guess that's chopped up to the fact that, yeah, these have been for a few generations, and it's likely that the Cathayans are arming up the TIGERMEN around the region, because, I mean, it makes sense for these very powerful mercenaries to also have the best armaments possible when dealing with the forces of chaos, as we now know that not only are they active around this period, but they were active during the time of Asavar Kul, who, as you are aware, or may not be aware, is the ever-chosen during the time of Warhammer the Old World, and led the forces of chaos in the event known as the Great War Against Chaos, one of the most devastating wars in the history of Warhammer Fantasy. So yeah, the TIGERMEN have likely become very useful during a lot of that period and coming up to the nowadays period, obviously leading up to the end times. The Warhammer art specifically stating that it was created by the Warhammer Studio art team, which again, some of my favorite artists are part of that team, could link towards the potential future of TIGERMEN minis in Warhammer the Old World, which would be fantastic. Despite the fact that stripes are not easy to paint, I do imagine that they would look absolutely amazing. Now this could mean that it's just going to be the Tiger Mercenaries for Warhammer the Old World and Total War Warhammer, but this could also link up to the fact that IND is still entirely a possibility for a number of reasons. Race packs have always been the biggest sellers for Total War Warhammer, and Creative Assembly know that for sure. Every time there's a race pack release, it's always a massive spike up of players, and it's mostly on the top sellers list for a few days. Players have always been wishing for as many races as possible: IND, Koresh, Nippon, Albion, and the rest. And we still have a few missing. In fact, we do know that Nagash is going to be a playable race at some point this year, unless there's any major delays. He does fall under his own distinction. Now, whether or not we get the Kingdoms of Ind is subject to both Creative Assembly and Games Workshop. I think it's more of an eventuality for Games Workshop's part because, well, we get so many new playable factions for each of the Warhammer settings nowadays. So I think it mostly depends on Creative Assembly here, depending on a few factors like willingness to do so, because at the end of the day, they've got some other big titles on the works, Medieval 3 and Total War 40k, and also if they see value in it, plus the main thing is the Warscape engine, which, as you are aware, Warhammer 3 runs on Warscape. It's an engine that is quite old and is struggling at certain points, which is why the AI sucks at the moment. Or Sieges, we're not going to make this about Warscape, right? Like, I could, but I won't. So another race pack could easily come in and they can charge, what, £25 I think is the average price for a race pack, a few legendary lords, a legendary hero, and a full new roster, with some TIGERMEN already available that already kind of pushes the roster a little bit too. So a lot of work is kind of already done. It's not like there's a lot of shortage in terms of what they could do for IND. Now, I don't know what Creative Assembly want to do with that, if they want to do that at all, but what we do know is that as from last year, well, basically 6 months ago when we got the financial report, Games Workshop themselves want to push into India financially. Well, they want to push worldwide, going into the Middle East, more into Europe, Asia, and the rest of the stuff. We've seen that obviously with Grand Cathay as they've pushed into China, and it's very likely that they see India as a massive untapped market. Which makes sense, there's a lot of people in India. Grand Cathay has done wonders for the introduction of Warhammer to the Far East, as we do know that it's become quite popular in terms of Total War Warhammer, and also for the miniatures. Like, I speak to a few influencers around the East because I'm always kind of curious to see how Warhammer is doing in different countries. And yeah, it seems to be kind of popular. Very popular in Japan for some reason, which is interesting because, like, apparently Warhammer is massive in Japan. And Games Workshop haven't thought, oh, well, you know, we have a Japanese nation in Warhammer. Why don't we just make a miniatures range for that? Who knows if that's what the plan is in the future? I'd love Nippon. But people are, in fact, incentivized to buy factions based around their cultures. It's why the Empire is so popular around Europeans, because, yeah, you know, that's based on the Holy Roman Empire. Same thing with Grand Cathay and all the rest. It's just general stuff. People are naturally going to gravitate to that. It's why humans are so popular in terms of MMO games, because people are more incentivized to play a faction or a specific culture which looks like them. It's just how it's always been. Not gonna lie, I find that kind of boring myself because I prefer playing like monsters and stuff, but yeah, I'm an outlier here. Apparently it's just minimal. But if Games Workshop want to hit the Indian market, having IND as a playable faction works quite well. Now, obviously, if that's the case, and it does eventually happen, well, it needs to still feel like Warhammer. The great thing is that Hindu mythology, for example, and this is just like a short example on screen right now, is pretty damn out there. loads of fantastical beasts, which could easily fit into the history of Warhammer. It's like how Cathay was interpreted and how many other races and factions are interpreted too. It looks great. Obviously, it's a very small example here, because if not, we'd be here for freaking years. Like, India has so much, but there's enough monsters that it's not just going to be another basic human race, right? You want it to be a bit out there, which is why Cathay did so well. You've got a bunch of human units, but you've also got like the Onyx Crowmen, you've got the Terracotta Sentinels. That type of stuff really elevates it, so it's something unique in its own right. And it's something that I could see happening in Warhammer pretty easily. The translation doesn't require a lot of work. It still has to be done respectfully, of course, but it would take the same approach as what happened with Grand Cathay, which would, during the creation of Grand Cathay, Creative Assembly and Games Workshop worked with sensitivity teams, so everything is introduced in the proper manner. Human-wise, we can expect kind of what we already know from IND. So there'd be elephant riders, there'd be horse riders, alongside some gunpowder-based units. We do know for a fact that the Doom rocket from the Skaven was actually kind of stolen from IND, because the tech was there, and the Skaven will see something going big boom and they'll go, yeah, this works, you know? Elephant riders in general would be cool, because we know that elephants are in IND, and I mean, who doesn't want that? You could get gunners on top of that. There's a lot of stuff that can be done to go from real world history and translating that into Warhammer. It's also easy to take into account that making another human faction should be a bit easier than making another monstrous faction. Yes, there'll be a lot of work going into the monsters and stuff, but the rig and the animations for a lot of the humans would end up being reused. So, say for example, you've got some Indish archers. Well, likely they'll take the same animations as Empire archers, because a man is still a man. Meaning that a lot of extra work could go into the big monsters, something that is actually going to be kind of cool. Could you imagine this giant monstrous cobra type thing? We don't know of any Indish monsters in Warhammer at the moment, as far as I'm aware, but stuff would have to be made up, like what happened with Grand Cathay. Start position-wise, I mean, you could easily have IND opened up, put 2 lords there and then 1 somewhere else. We do know that IND, for example, isn't one unified nation. It's rather a series of kingdoms, hence the name Kingdoms of IND, and each of them kind of ruled by their own Raja. The Raja title, as far as I'm aware, so excuse my ignorance if not, is basically just it's a king. Or they could go in a different route and have the gods actually being the legendary lords, being this whole thing of yes, the Pantheon lives among the people, which is something that was mentioned in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay a long time ago, but again, that lore is so old you never know if it's still relevant. I mean, look how much Grand Cathay has changed from what we knew in the past to the current present-day iteration, which is something that we have physically both in game and in miniature form. It completely depends here, if Games Workshop want to do this and what they'd want to do with it, but it could be insane. You could actually see quite a lot of potential here, and I could imagine that the Warhammer studio designers could have a hell of a lot of fun. Again, time will tell if Games Workshop and Creative Assembly or both want to do this, but the most important thing, and I think this is something that needs to be stated over and over again, if you want something in Total War or in the tabletop, you have to keep reminding the companies that you want that. Obviously, respectfully, of course, don't start threatening developers and stuff, but it's really important to make that line of communication open and show that you want it. This is why we've ended up with so much stuff being changed in Total War over the years, and this is why we eventually got back Warhammer the Old World. Warhammer Fantasy was discontinued, but, the fans kept talking about it, the fans kept really pushing and keeping the flame burning, and there's where we go, right? I think that's really important. It's the same thing. Unless they flat out say no, I mean, they said there's no current plans for Araby, which is kind of fucking stupid in my opinion. There's so much that can be done. IND is something that really needs to be thought about by Games Workshop and also Creative Assembly as another potential pathway into not only expanding the horizon with potential customers, but also introducing new stuff, which would be kind of cool. In my point of view, it's not about diversity and inclusion and whatever. It's more about, let's get some cool shit in the games. That's the most important thing in my point of view. Now we have Indish units in-game as mercenaries. That's a start. Let's keep that pushing. Why just mercenaries? Why not a full playable culture? And this is why I was kind of inspired to make this video, because after seeing those TIGERMEN, it's oh goddamn, now mercenaries are going to be a thing, right? Mercenary units, proper ones. that could lead towards getting some really cool stuff in the future. So Ind, the Naga of Koresh, maybe even some samurai from Nippon, which they probably have like a different name, but you know what I mean. Hell, Al-Muqta's Desert Dogs, right? Stuff like that is possible, but just as mercenaries would kind of be pointless. I mean, it's still cool, but it would be nice if we saw everything implemented properly. Finally, we need to talk about the map. Even if Ind does or does not happen, and that could be something like maybe a year down the line, 2 years down the line, it also very much depends in general with what happens with 40k med free, because CA have this thing of they get distracted with other projects. Like, I don't want to sound mean there, but they do, and this is why other projects do suffer. Cough cough hyenas. We need to see the opening up of the map. Like, this is something that I wanted to talk about again very heavily here, because it's something that I feel very strongly about, and you guys need to talk about that, because yeah, the map needs to be opened. Even if we don't get it as a full playable race, the map needs to be open. From a lore perspective, it would be great to know. Shows that those areas are kind of like door ajar and so on. Secondly, I mean, it's just like the map has problems right now. The congestion is getting really bad. We're at 104 legendary lords. We're going to go to what, 110 with Lords of the End Times? It's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. Way too much whack-a-mole. They need to start opening up areas just to make sure that the game becomes a little bit smoother in that regard. Like, in a perfect world, we'd see Ind and Koresh both opened up, even if it doesn't mean that we'll get the races. But it's really important to just, like, for the purpose of gameplay. This whole, oh, let's add in a new region and stick a new legendary lord in there doesn't work. Like, a whole province and stuff is cool, but it's just, it's becoming chock-a-block, and it is becoming kind of jarring. Hell, I do think that in the best circumstance, they could open up Ind without a playable race at the beginning. You know, just stick some, like, starter factions in there, some empire factions and the rest, just to kind of get the movement going, right? And see how people go around those areas. See what could potentially happen in there, and how interest, I think is probably the better word, spikes up on Ind more and more. See it as the whole thing of one good thing could potentially lead to another. I think one good thing opening up the map could lead to not only a better gameplay experience, but also a chance to see how Ind could potentially work, which would then expand further possibilities or revenue for the companies, and just more fun stuff for the players to play around with, both in tabletop and also gameplay, video gameplay wise. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's start a bit of discussion. This video is likely going to come out a little bit late because I just thought about it this morning. Like, I'd been thinking about it for a while since I saw the TIGERMEN, and I feel like now is the time to talk about it. We need to talk about Ind. Have a good one, guys, and I'll see you all again very, very soon.